listening to The Starting Zone, a podcast about World of Warcraft and the people who play it. And now, here are your hosts.
Well, hello and welcome to The Starting Zone, the podcast about World of Warcraft, the people who play it. Today is October 25th, 2022, and my name is Spencer Downey. Thank you so much for listening and subscribing to the podcast. I'm joined today, as always, by my co-host, Jason Lucas. Jason, how are you doing on this patch day of Tuesday?
Wow, we've played 9.x for the last time. We will never play it again.
Yes.
It is gone. And you know, a lot of people are celebrating this, and I understand that. I feel a little weird because I feel like the second year of Shadowlands was so much better than the first year that it was actually pretty good, despite all of the drubbing that it took. And the first year was maybe one of the worst years of the game's existence we've ever had. But credit where it's due. I think, you know, it went out kind of with a bang, and it's not going to be remembered probably very fondly, but I don't know how fair that is. That said, you know, if you turn players off initially, they're not going to want to come back to see what else you're cooking up. So that's, you know, I think that's a lesson that they learned the hard way the last couple times out. But, you know, it's about 12:30 Eastern on the 25th as we record this. We don't have servers. We probably won't have servers for a few more hours at least, if anything is functional at any point today. But as we speak, like the client-side patch has been deployed. Like my local version of WoW is updated to 10.0. You know, we don't have a lot of new stuff to play right now, but still, it's a really exciting time for people to check out all of their new, you know, class reworks, the new talent system, set up their UIs. There's some other nice little nuggets in this patch as well that will actually affect what you are doing in and around, you know, WoW on a daily basis, but no new content yet. So it's a little bit of a weird pre-patch cycle event or anything, you know, whatever you want to call it, because it's kind of split into these two separate phases. And the first phase is really very much just like, I think they just want to get the class changes stood up and get the new UI stood up, and then, you know, kind of do some damage control for a little bit and then bring in the new content, like, you know, the new class, the starting zone for it, the invasion events, all that stuff. It's just weird that we're going to have less time with the new stuff to actually do than in this kind of, you know, ramp up period.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been an interesting time in World of Warcraft's history these past 2 years. Because, yeah, I think you're right. I think a lot of people will not have the fondest memories of this expansion, but there'll always be that caveat of like, well, but in the last 6 months, and you're like, yes, that's right. If this expansion, the last, you know, right. 10 months, 12 months of it, well, 10 months of it really have been great months of, you know, developers really getting a chance to give the people what they want, if you will, in a lot of cases. And so that's been fantastic. So I definitely feel as though that caveat will continue to exist all the way along, and we'll have to see if people can remember that well enough. But before we dive too deep into World of Warcraft, it's important that we mention some things going on with the people who make the game and make the games from the companies that we love. And so there's been some updates with a couple of things here, Jason. The first being Vicarious Visions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we got a real mixed bag of ABK news this week, don't we? We're going to start with some really good news and then some, I mean, I don't know if it's bad news. It's kind of disappointing news, I guess. It's
ongoing disappointing news.
I think the response to disappointment is good, though. But the first is the good news, which is that Blizzard Albany, which used to be known as Vicarious Visions, which is a long tenured studio in Albany, worked on a lot of projects over the years and was like an Activision studio until recently, and they got folded into Blizzard proper to work on Diablo 2 Resurrected, Diablo 4, World of Warcraft, stuff like that. Their union vote has been greenlit by the National Labor Relations Board. So congrats to their QA department. This is great news. Activision Blizzard sued them to try to get them to not do this, and you know, they went to the hassle of putting it before the NLRB. And the NLRB said, you know what, your 21 QA tester employees, they can vote in a union election. You know, Blizzard's argument was that, part of the argument was that they work on different games because they, you know, like I mentioned, some of them work on Diablo 2 Resurrected, some of them work on Diablo 4, some of them work on World of Warcraft. And the NLRB dismissed that. They said it's not, you know, they don't have different material concerns because they work on different projects.
Yeah, a point to that. My union that works on theater shows and concerts, that sort of thing. We work on a variety of shows. I could have three of my buddies. We could all be working on three different shows at the same time. I could be working on something in three different cities. Doesn't matter. You're still doing the same work. You're not, just because you're not working on the same project doesn't mean that it's somehow different in some way. So yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's, the job has the same concerns, should be compensated similarly. And the NLRB agreed with that assessment from the QA testers who were looking to unionize. They also mentioned that the NLRB mentioned that the low pay of testers helped differentiate the group from the rest of the employees. QA is kind of famously underpaid and undervalued compared to, design positions and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's so weird that it's considered an entry-level position. It's like, yeah, but it's one of the most crucial aspects of the entire work is making sure things run well once it's done being built.
Right. I mean, a lot of times it's like one of the biggest things you could hang your hat on with a ship game is,
exactly,
if QA has a seat at the table during development, that's how you're going to ship a good product. So, and a lot of times bugs go out, but that's not QA's fault. QA usually identifies them, and because of production schedules and whatever else, they don't get fixed. QA doesn't fix the bugs necessarily; they're identifying them for engineers to fix.
Exactly.
But yeah, so I think that's kind of interesting too. Is like, Activision Blizzard's sort of argument was, well, these aren't a big enough group of employees to make a decision like this. And the NLRB was like, well, you don't pay them as much as you pay the other departments. So that's a good reason for them to unionize. So the NLRB is going to be mailing out the ballots this week, the 27th, and the vote is going to be counted via video conference November 18th. And I have a pretty good feeling that Blizzard Albany QA is going to vote to unionize, so that's great. This is a big win for Blizzard labor. I'm glad to see it, and I think it's funny how Activision Blizzard's kind of pathetic arguments against allowing them to unionize were shot down by the NLRB. I appreciated that part.
I appreciate the reasoning of literally, well, you don't pay them as much as everybody else, so they probably have a pretty good right to unionize.
Right, yeah. That's kind of the icing on the cake there for me. Now, shortly after this, last week, Activision Blizzard has a new chief communications officer, I believe her title is, by the name of Lulu Chang Messervy. She previously sat on the board of Activision Blizzard, which says to me that she's one of Bobby Kotick's cronies, right? Like to me, that's what I hear when I hear the board of directors of Activision Blizzard. She's actually been hired to be, to a chief position. And she decided that a good way to sort of publicly or semi-publicly, like company-wide, respond to the union vote was to post a Slack message with responses disabled, disparaging the union and threatening to withhold raises and benefits from workers who joined unions, and also kind of sort of hinting that union affiliation and union support was being surveilled by the company.
Really,
and it's
really
kind of
smart things to do as a communications officer. Yes, I understand.
Yeah, like just a real bad look from somebody who is, I think the employees should be rightly suspicious of, right? Like the board has protected some really terrible behavior. And she comes in. I think she just took the position from our good friend Fran Townsend, who you may remember as being like one of the public faces of that horrendous blow up last summer.
Yes, who now works stepped down exclusively for the board, right? Not the board. Yeah, Fran stepped down from the position. They hired Lulu in off of the board to this position. And so she insults the rank and file employees in Slack and calls for direct dialogue in a message that people can't respond to, right? Which is, that's a power move right there. And then she just kind of tweeted through it. She was on Twitter just making a complete fool out of herself for the last several days. And just really, I mean, what else would you expect from corporate Activision Blizzard leadership? This is consistent with everything. This is who these people are. This is how they want to run this company. It's what we've seen since this stuff really entered the spotlight in July of 21. And in response, the Communication Workers of America, which is the union that is representing these unionized groups of Blizzard employees, they filed unfair labor practice charges against Activision Blizzard in response to these messages. That's great. I mean, this kind of shows you like
having that sort of organizational structure and backing, like having a union infrastructure among the workforce, lets them have a leg to stand on.
Exactly.
When somebody in a C-suite position is potentially violating labor laws. I mean, I'm not a prosecutor. I'm not a judge, right? I can't get into the particulars here, but like, employees are allowed to join unions in the United States under labor law generally. And threatening employees not to do so is, at the very least, like not really ethical. So I'm glad that they have, some backing and an organization to turn to help them resolve this kind of stuff. I mean, it's just completely unacceptable behavior by these Blizzard executives. It just never ends. And just yet another black eye for these people. Just when you thought like you weren't going to, this was going to quiet down maybe, or like they'd at least stop posting through it. It never stops.
Yeah, it's too bad. But I am glad about the good news. So at least we got something going on there. But before we dive into
big wins for sure. Exactly. I mean, I think even Lulu's nonsense that she's posting and slacking on Twitter, just the clapback of like, okay, well, the Communication Workers of America are going to file charges against you for that. Like, that's actually a win for labor as well.
It is. Yeah. Well, it just means there's a lot of eyes on it too, which is great. So I'm glad to hear it. Before we dive into what's going on this week with the pre-patch launch stuff, let's kick off what's going on last week. This past week for me with WoW was actually just some gold sales. Sylvanas sale in particular was something that a lot of people were looking for. Non-faded Sylvanas before we roll into the entirely everything faded stuff today meant that it was a very easy sort of thing to do, right? You can go and knock everything over. Those easy mounts are now going away in the sense that you now have to kill the faded bosses in order to get a shot at them. So it just means that those sales will probably be a little bit harder to get because there'll be fewer teams that really want to knock those things out as a casual kind of thing to do. So yeah, we did that this past week. And then that was most of my WoW time outside of going into PTR, building out my UI, copying the strings down so that I can just load in my UI. That was the other thing that I did. And so I'm looking forward to that being a pretty smooth transition as far as UI and my talents and whatnot go. But yeah,
nice.
We'll have to see what other sort of changes we have in store. The big question that hangs over everybody's heads at the moment is about legendaries and what's happening with legendaries, if they're going to be on or off when servers go up. We haven't been told they'll be off, so everyone's sort of making the assumption that they'll be working and everything will be fine, and basically it compensates for not having those extra 5 talent points that you would get as you leveled up once Dragonflight launches, and so that sort of lets you put a legendary to get the talent that you wanted, and then you can use your talent points to go a different direction. But we'll have to wait and see whether that's actually the case, or if they're just going to be like, oops, I thought we told you guys. You didn't know this? Oh, that was a mistake. We'll find out.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we're WoW players, right? So if something isn't explicitly in blue text, we then it's a question.
Well, not just in blue text, but in blue text in multiple places. Questions. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's got to be thrown in our faces.
We need to be told specifically, like, is this on or off? Yes or no? And I look at as much blue text as probably anybody in North America, right? Like, it's sort of part of how we put the show together on a weekly basis. I haven't seen anything about legendaries being turned off, but also it's hard to gauge from PTR because stuff is in flux, and like stuff that we know is getting turned off was still on PTR and stuff like that. So all we can do at this exact moment in time is wait till we have servers and see what happens.
Exactly. What would you get up to this past week?
Well, it was a bit of a lighter week in the live game for me, and actually in the game overall. I played a lot the previous week, and I had some other stuff that needed my attention. But we went in on schedule to raid last week of 9.x raiding. Very low attendance. People were just totally checked out. I kind of had a hard time putting a group together, and the group that I did put together, we were missing some really key like DPS players and stuff, and it took a long time to work our way through Faded Heroic Sepulchre. It took most of those 2 raid nights when we've damn near single night cleared it in the past, right? The boss fights, in some cases, were longer than I've ever seen them, including when we were initially progging Heroic. Part of that, I think, was, like we just didn't have a great split of Faded affixes last week. Like, they didn't line up great with some of the bosses, so that didn't help. And yeah, we had some people playing alts or low gear tunes, like people who had maybe missed some time or whatever, and we didn't have our some of our really heavy hitters. So I had some concerns that we weren't going to be able to do it at all, but we did clear it, which was nice. I only did 4 Keystones last week. I did not plug into my traditional 4 or 5 or 6 Junkyard 15s. I only did 4. The pull for the gear and stuff is a bit less, obviously, at this point. And also, like last week, I took sockets. I took the currency to get sockets out of my vault, and then I can't actually apply them to one of the items I wanted the socket, and I've had a ticket open for a week, and it says the ticket response time is 24 days. So by the time I can socket my bracer,
days?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Like I don't know if that's just like a display bug or there's like some issue that is like taking forever to get resolved, so it's like driving up the whole response time. But like by the time I get these bracers socketed, I'm not going to care anymore. So
you'll be leveling in Dragonflight when they go,
right,
oh, by
exactly.
the way, you can now socket those bracers. Sorry about that. Oh, thanks.
Nice. Thanks
Perfect.
for resolving my ticket.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean the pull is just kind of not there to do that stuff. I do still need a couple pieces for Transmog for the Mythic set, but I feel like I'm just probably going to ramp down on that. We did get lower Kara 20 in time with guildies, which felt really nice. It felt great to kind of slay that boss, if you will, with the guys that I play with on a regular basis in season, in 9.x data, in season 4 for real. It felt like we were kind of getting that weight off our shoulders. You know what I mean? A couple of us had already done it in pugs or whatever, but I think 3 of the guys in the group hadn't done it yet. So that was awesome. And one of the guys really hasn't been shooting for 20s, and I've sort of just been dragging him along because he's a really competent player, and he's one of my good WoW friends and video game friends and life friends for a long time now. So, we're starting to get him the 20s, and we ended up also getting an upper key last week. So we got him the Karazhan teleport just in back-to-back runs, which felt awesome. I think Karazhan's like a great teleport to have because it's right in the middle of stuff you might want to go to.
Yeah.
So that was Keystones. And then I actually I did the Cataclysm Dungeon time walking event last week because there's still a faded trinket kicking around I'd like a shot at. So I did 5 dungeons and I got a cloak. So it's like I knew that I wasn't ripping the thing I wanted out of this box, but I was like,
why not?
I'll try it. Time walking didn't feel too bad. I think the Cataclysm pool is okay. I don't love what's the one, the throne of the, not the throne of the tides, the one that's in the air.
The 4 winds.
The 3 boss dungeon.
It's the 4 winds.
That one's just not. I don't love that one, and I got it twice in my 5, so I kind of miss Grim Batol and flying the dragon around and blowing everything up.
Yes, I actually really, really enjoyed flying the dragon around and blowing everything up. That was always a highlight of that dungeon.
Yeah.
All right.
Maybe it'll get back in the pool for Dragonflight. Maybe when they do like a 10.2.5 or something, maybe they refresh the pool. I feel like we should have Grim Batol for Dragonflight, don't you?
I mean, it makes sense to me. It's all Black Dragonflight based. Yeah.
Right, and it's like it's where Alexstrasza was held captive by the orcs and all that. Like it would, maybe they'll rotate it back in. I would be cool with like every patch or every season getting the time walking dungeons mixed up a little bit. Now that we've seen this rotation, but that's another story.
Maybe we'll get time walking Blackrock Depths or something at the same time. Who knows?
Yeah, that'd be cool.
All right, let's hop into what's going on this week in World of Warcraft because we got plenty to talk about. Well, if you haven't guessed already, this is pre-patch week, although it's the first phase of pre-patch week, and we'll talk a little bit more about what that means, but primarily it means that there's not a whole lot new stuff to do. The new stuff to do is in phase 2. This is sort of the, hey, here's all the new talent changes and all those sorts of reworks that are taking place. So it's not as much to talk about when it comes to like, hey, here's all the new stuff. That's going to be in a couple weeks for that show. But the Arena Skirmish bonus event is going on this week, which means your honor gains from Arena Skirmishes are increased by 50%. And of course, there's a quest to win 10 of them, which gets you some rewards. You still got all your normal daily stuff that you want to sort of, or daily and weekly stuff you want to sort of hop into as far as a new deal and patterns within patterns. If you're trying to get some of the reputation stuff finished off, if you're trying to get some of the anima stuff finished off, those are always good for you. The PvP brawl for the week is Warsong Scramble. So this is Warsong Gulch, but the flag, you basically just cap the flags whenever you want. You don't have to have your flag returned in order to cap, and you got to cap 10 times. First team to cap 10 times. Sort of rushing back and forth. is what Warsong Scramble ends up being. And then world boss wise, all of them are faded now. So like we got Nurgosh Muckform, the big Dredger and Revendreth, faded. So if you want any loot or any memories or something off of him, feel free. Go and knock him out. You got more Geth, and you also have Antros. All of those are faded bosses. So great way to gear up a character if you're someone who's like, hey, I'm just sort of getting stuff going. Certainly in 2 weeks from now, when you're leveling up your evokers, when those go live in 2 weeks, that's when this will be a really great way to sort of get them some higher end pieces of gear, to get them established and ready for Dragonflight leveling. The world bosses will be great for that. Unfortunately, you only get to kill them all twice, but it is, 6 potential chances at nice pieces outside of doing raid and whatever.
Yeah, and I think if you're clocking in at like 285 for Dragonflight level up from what I played on beta, I think you're going to feel pretty strong. So
yeah.
You don't need to be at that like 300 threshold to be like, okay, outdoor Dragonflight feels good. Like it's tuned much lower than that, at least on beta.
The biggest thing I find with having that 300 eye level kind of thing is typically it means you don't start replacing things until the very 90% through the leveling process is when you start actually going, oh, this is an upgrade.
Yeah.
Oh, I'll change that. So that's really what it comes down to. So it means that whatever you're receiving, you have to spend less time thinking about whether or not you need to equip it, and you can keep moving forward, which is what you see a lot of Mythic Raiders doing. I know there's several people on my team who are trying to organize how to get 3 characters to max level first night so that the next day when Mythic Zeros open, they can start running Mythic Zeros right away. I'm not going to be doing this. This is not what I'm interested in doing.
Right.
But that is, the speed leveling is something that a lot of people factor in. And so gearing your character as much as possible now means less likelihood of having any kind of upgrades along the way, which means you can just sort of plow through content without really thinking when it comes to leveling like that. And I know that's almost like an offensive way to play the game to some people because of the story content and the visuals and everything else. But some people's priorities are different than others. And in this case, these people feel like, hey, you know what? I really just want to be max level and be as powerful as I can and optimize as best as I can, as fast as I can. And that's what their goal is. So that's what they're doing.
Well, plus you make all that extra gold from cashing in all those quest rewards.
Oh my goodness, yeah. And then you get ahead on professions. You're ahead of the wave of people leveling up, which means you don't have as much server latency ishes. You don't have as many mob spawn issues. Like there's a lot of things that
just DE it even. Yeah, I mean DE and it that early on could be huge.
Yeah.
I mean, we can't confirm that all the world bosses are actually faded right now. I have a feeling that this isn't going to work right this week.
God.
That's my prediction, is that it's not going to. It's supposed to, but we'll see. I mean, you should definitely try it, but keep an eye out. Keep an eye on official communications.
Yeah.
This is what I would like to call oops, all faded. Remember when you have the Captain Crunch that was just all the crunch berries?
Oh, yes.
Oops,
right.
all berries.
Yes.
This is oops, all faded.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
there you go. We're going to try to coin that. I don't know if it's going to work, but we'll give it a shot.
I had to have the crunch berries explanation in order to actually understand it. So it might make it there. Let's hope. All right.
I think for people, for WoW players of a certain age, it might ring a bell.
Yes.
I don't know.
Mythic plus Avix's Tyrannical, Inspiring, Quaking. At least that's what we believe it is going into this. Obviously, the rotation may shift based off of pre-patch, but this would mean that boss enemies have more health and inflict increased damage. Some non-boss enemies have an inspiring presence that strengthens their allies, and periodically all players emit a shockwave, inflicting damage and interrupting allies. So spread out on trash so that you're not quaking each other. Inspiring means that mobs aren't going to be CCable as long as there's an inspiring mob in the group. The inspiring mob itself is CCable, so you can stun it, sheep it, root it, do whatever you want to it, drag other mobs away from it, and then they will lose the aura that it gives, and you can CC them all you want, or you can just focus it down and kill the inspiring mob first, then engage all the other ones, and then you're inside a better situation when it comes to being able to CC and deal with them. Those are the two main strats for inspiring. But Quaking and Tyrannical, like, this is probably a really good week for Tyrannical, to be honest. Like, inspiring Quaking is something that doesn't necessarily have any sort of symbiosis together. And when it comes to dealing with them, they're both fairly easy to deal with as long as you're dealing with the inspiring mob first, or you're CCing it like I talked about. And then none of these apply to Tyrannical outside of the niche cases that they've been resolving of people getting grouped together inside some sort of transport system or knockback and all dying to Quaking at the same time. But they've been snuffing those out left, right, and center. So, like, I think this is great. This is a great Tyrannical week.
Yeah, I mean, from the standpoint of combos, yes. We don't know about tuning, so I don't know how it's going to feel. The combat game is shifting dramatically today, so we'll see. But, I mean, in terms of just, like, how you approach the combo, yeah, I think this is a good week for sure. Also, it might be our last look at Inspiring for a while. I'm not sure when it comes back around, but it's not in the Season 1 Dragonflight pool. So I think Inspiring is one of the least interesting Mythic Plus affixes, and it creates certain situations where stuff just feels unnecessarily bad. So I'm not going to miss it. It's also easier to deal with on non-fort weeks because the strategy of just blowing up the inspired mob is much easier to do when it doesn't have 30% extra health or what have you.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like I see this and my brain goes, "This is a great tyrannical combo," but I don't know what to expect. So I don't know what to offer you in terms of expectations this week because I have no idea what the game is going to feel like, which is kind of cool. But the first tyrannical boss this week is going to be like, okay, what are we in for here? Not exactly sure.
I would just say that the tradition that we've seen with pre-patch content is that everything gets substantially easier. That is the tradition we've always seen. It
seems to be the goal.
It feels as though the talent changes might be the way that they chose to do it, where some classes are just 12% to 15% higher damage than they were before this sort of thing happened. And you have to keep in mind, like, if legendaries aren't turned off, that's the if, then you essentially get a third legendary is what's going to be happening, right? Because you're going to have your Covenant one that's going to be equipped, which you then don't need to talent into if that's something that you could have talented into. You're going to have your other legendary, which again, you don't need to talent into. And then you'd have whatever you actually talent into, which means you could have 3 or 4 legendaries effects on your character at one time. So my assumption is we are going to be substantially more powerful than we were coming into this, and they probably haven't tuned anything up, which means stuff's going to feel a lot easier. So I think that's the objective and the goal with a lot of pre-patches.
Yeah, I would say, just at face value, I believe that the class and talent trees represent a lot more available power, even at level 60, than what we're typically used to. So I think you're going to be able to come up with some pretty powerful builds specifically to tackle Mythic Plus dungeons and stuff like that. So
yeah.
I think and yes, I agree. I think the goal is always for them to have this kind of post-season pre-patch type of time span feel easy and accessible and be tuned low and all that. I don't know if they have always hit that mark, but that's been more recently when they're bringing in these things and designing classes around features that aren't in yet because the expansion's not out yet.
Yeah.
And in this case, we're looking at missing 5 talent points out of, 60, 55, whatever it is, versus, stuff like, oh, well, you don't have you're losing all of your corrupted gear, but you're not getting your Covenant Soulbind conduits yet. This is not that kind of, man, remember 2 years ago, we talked about the power cliff we were driving off of like every week. That is not what is happening with this transition. I think, if anything, you unless the tuning is completely out of whack, you should have access to more power today than you did yesterday, generally.
Yeah. All right, Hallow's End is also live. It's obviously going until November 1st. So, you got this is entering the last week of you being able to actually participate in this. If there's anything you need as far as Sinister Squashling or pets or mounts or pet disguises, the Headless Horseman event, all those things, they're all going to go away next week. So be sure you're taking advantage of your daily opportunities to get things and getting the tricky treats you want. And big old reminder that your garrison has more tricky treats in it as well. If you head on back to your Draenor, you can go to your garrison and get some additional tricky treats out of that too, because some of these things are fairly pricey if you're trying to get a bunch of stuff this year alone. Winds of Wisdom.
And don't forget to go to Val'sharah. Go to Val'sharah
right.
and do the quest out by Blackrook Hold. There's a daily out there too. If you're really trying to max out on those treats in this last week here, if you got your eye on something and you're not quite there, do everything you can do, because you're gonna have to wait a whole year and all your tricky treats are gonna go away.
Yes, feels very bad. I kind of wish they let us keep them year over year, but it is what it is. I suppose it prevents someone from stockpiling them like I do with Darkmoon Faire stuff.
Right. They want people doing the events when they put new stuff in. Yeah, stuff like that. Yeah.
I just stockpile all of my Darkmoon Faire prize tickets until I can actually buy the new stuff that they put in every time.
Right.
All right. Ongoing buffs is the Winds of Wisdom, that 50% experience buff for characters level 10 to 59. So if you're someone who wants to actually level up a tune, this is, the beginning of the end for that to be able to happen, because they've talked about that going away with Evokers going live, which means you have 2 weeks left of this. We will see if they choose to change that, but from what we've heard, they don't want people having the 50% buff for Evokers, because Evokers have a very defined starting experience, and this would incredibly bork that. But we'll see what they choose to do. Anyways, Day of the Dead, that's coming up as well, November 1st to 3rd. If you're someone who wants to get yourself that macabre marionette or any sort of fun stuff like that, you can get all those things during Day of the Dead. There's the different roses for your hair and all that kind of stuff that you get during that. Yeah,
there's a bunch of cool cosmetics. It's a smaller event than, it's not like a traditional like big WoW holiday, like a 2-week long thing. It's just 3 days or parts of 3 days.
Yeah.
But there are some really cool and unique cosmetic items you can get from doing it if you've never done it. And it doesn't really it's not a huge time investment where you're going to be grinding a currency for 3 days or something. Like, there's a couple things to do out there, and then, you'll probably be good. Check it out if you've never done it. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. All right, let's start diving into a bit of this pre-expansion content of stuff that's coming in. So right off the bat, obviously new talent system, something we've mentioned a couple of times. The important thing to remember is there are presets already built in that you can choose from. If you just want to hop in the game and go, you can do that. It doesn't take too long to spend your talent points, but there are still traps in there when it comes to, I can talent into Innervate, giving myself Innervate and giving someone who I casted on Innervate and gaining benefits from it, and then choose not to talent into Innervate at all and not even have the spell. That still exists. That is still a thing that they've left in. So just pay a little bit of attention if you are going to go through the trees yourself, that there isn't a situation like that where you're improving one spell inside of your actual specialization tree. For, me playing Resto Druid, I'd be improving Innervate inside that Resto Druid tree. But my general Druid tree, for just being a Druid, I could choose not to take Innervate, which is just a trap. So just be careful when you're doing that if you're going to do it. Right.
Yeah, I mean, there are starter builds like you mentioned. There is the import-export feature, so you can grab strings from a talent build you find online and import it, and then you're set up. You can also, if you have a build that you like, you can share it with your friends easily. I will say one thing I'm seeing a lot is I'm seeing people sort of have this reaction like, I don't know how I'm going to build my character because I don't have guides online that show me exactly what to do, and I'm nervous about this. And I got to say, I don't know how much it's really going to matter. I think if you know your class,
can change your talents whenever you want.
Yeah, right. That's the whole point of the system, right? Is the flexibility. And I think if you have some level of familiarity with your class and spec, it's going to be obvious what you don't want to miss, right?
Yes.
Like your big buttons are talents that you have to pick, and you're going to want to pick those. And some of the other stuff could be like, well, this is better in single target versus AoE, or this is better in, whatever type of situation. This is better on a high movement fight. This is better on a low movement fight. Stuff like that, and you can swap that out as you see fit, as long as you're not in combat, as long as a Mythic Plus timer isn't running, as long as you're not in a PvP instance, you can change it. You can change it between raid bosses.
You can save them and have your own little hey, quick swap. Let's just swap between them. Like, you can do that really easily.
Right.
I'm sure eventually there'll be a macro button, if there isn't already, that you can hit that will automatically change your entire talent set to something else if someone hasn't made a weak or something for it already. So, there'll be things to do on the fly.
I think the cool thing to do right now is to experiment with stuff that seems fun. I think if you are, unless you really don't know how to play a class, you're picking up a new main or something, and you are really lost. Yeah, then go with the starter build and just kind of get a feel for it.
Yeah.
If you're familiar with your class, I think at least this week, pick what seems cool and just go with it, and don't worry about refreshing the Discord or the Icy Veins guide or whatever, hoping that the build gets posted. I think the design goal is that we don't live in that world anymore, and that maybe there's a meta build or a min-maxed build for each encounter or each dungeon or whatever. Fine, but the whole point here is that you can make a lot of meaningful choices without being punished for them, right? It's actually a really cool system. If you've never messed with it in any of the testing or anything, it might be a little intimidating when you sit down to see how many different talents there are and how the trees kind of build down the rows as you go. But after a couple of minutes, I think it starts feeling familiar. A lot of the stuff that is going to be, I don't know, where the sort of decision comes in, where it's I don't know, I just want somebody to tell me what's better, is going to be stuff. I think I mentioned it recently on the show. This is stuff on the power level of an Azerite trait or a conduit. It's stuff that is nice to have, and it rounds out your build, and it gives you some nice passives, or it gives you some other kind of benefit. But like, I'm not going to forget to talent in the shield wall, right? Like, it's got a big square around it in the talent tree. I know I need this. Other talents modify it. Like, yes, I'm going to pick the important buttons.
The thing to really remember here is that the majority of your talent tree, once you sort of played around with it enough or had gotten used to it over a couple of weeks, isn't going to change. Like 80% of your tree, 85, maybe 90% of your tree, you're always going to put points in the same place. There's going to be those like 4 or 5 tops, could even be 2 abilities that you kind of swap out between. Or you'll have this is kind of my Mythic Plus tree, and my Mythic Plus tree involves me putting these 5 points into this side of my tree as opposed to that side of my tree. Like that is going to be the differences that you start to see in these builds, where it's like, well, I always pick this. So what's the actual thing that changes, right? And there's going to be a lot of things that you just always pick. So that's something that you should also keep in mind, that like it will get much simpler and much easier to understand just in a few weeks of playing around with it. So, give it a chance.
The other thing I want to point out on that topic is, like, the trees are pretty heavily gated as you move down them vertically, right? Kind of, I mean, it's like the old trees where, like, if you go play Classic, you have to spend X number of points until you can move down to the next row. And I think, at least from my experience, mostly playing with Warrior, like, the gating is heavy.
Very.
You're always like, man, I don't want to spend 2 more points here. I want to go down farther.
Yeah.
So that kind of makes you take stuff that, like, maybe you don't love it, or maybe it's not like a super sexy thing for your character to do, but it is important for your class to actually function. So I think that they made, I can't speak to every single tree that exists in the game. I think just philosophically, they made some smart choices about how the trees are constructed to kind of like urge you, just give you a little nudge into taking the stuff that you definitely need, and then you can flex in these different directions. And I'm really happy with them. I think the way that Warrior and Prot shaped up over the course of Alpha and Beta has been really fun. It feels great. It feels like, okay, there's a couple different play styles that I can see, emerging from here, and I can kind of pick, like, okay, this is what I want to do when I'm outdoors and I'm not like actually tanking for anybody. This is what I want to do when I'm in a dungeon and I'm constantly going to be in melee combat with multiple targets. This is what I want to do when I'm on a raid boss and I need to make sure I survive that big hit. All that stuff is in there. And I think, I can't speak for everybody, but I think a lot of players have wanted this kind of flexibility and this kind of ability to make like impactful choices without having a big downside for a long time now. And I think it's the kind of thing that is going to be iterated on a lot. We're going to see changes to it, throughout Dragonflight's existence and beyond. And I'm not saying that like it's going to launch in a state of perfection, but I think it's a really good direction to go in with class design. And I'm looking forward to messing around with it in a live context where I'm playing endgame content that I know with people that I play with and that we're figuring it out together. It's going to be really fun.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what the community puts together when it comes to builds. I think there's going to be a lot of like, ooh, I didn't know that this and this put together actually gives you access to that talent and this talent kind of thing, where you might have built the tree in your head a number of times and think that it looks pretty good and this makes sense, but only putting 1 point into this thing and only putting 1 point into that thing suddenly actually hits a threshold to do something else that's cool. I think there'll be some of those sorts of builds that come about, especially once we get the extra 5 points when Dragonflight launches. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what people come up with. Okay, speaking of seeing what people come up with, your HUD, your UI, your whole interface that you look at with all of your character information and buttons and everything is now super customizable with the new edit mode that's been added and how it all works and been updated. They've done the majority of the changes that I asked for when it came to grid and having things snap together. I wish you could snap things to the grid. I'm just putting that out there now. I would love an ability to snap things to the grid.
You kind of can, but the snapping is not real smart. So sometimes it can't tell what you're trying to snap it to, and it doesn't typically guess right.
I want 2 boxes. I want a box that's snap, and snap should just let you snap things to other things. So a bar to a bar, that kind of idea. And I want snap to grid, and that's a second checkbox I want to be able to click where you can literally go, all right, I'm going to snap these initial items to the grid so they're in places that are really nice, locked in, make sense places. toggle that off and then turn on snap and then just snap everything else to those things.
Like I'm going to anchor my main bars into this spot, and then I'm going to put other frames or whatever around them. Yeah, I mean, you can definitely do that with with edit mode, but it's hard to get it really precisely exactly that way. But it's, you know, and that kind of stuff just drives me bonkers. Like, what if it's not exactly lined up? It's like,
I'm with you.
It's so hard to look at, and then
it's hard to look at.
I don't have the mouse accuracy to get it exactly where it needs to go. I need that snapping assist.
I mean, I would love a snapping assist, because I will spend 30 minutes or 40 minutes like just tweaking WeCoras slightly, but up and down in size,
trying to
and
move it up a
shape,
pixel. Like, please just go here.
Yeah, exactly.
Why won't you go there?
Yeah. So that's certainly an option, as well as, you know, extra action bars you can turn on. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on with your HUD. So the best part about it, though, is you can export these, which is what I talked about at the top of the show, where once you put together what you like, export it to a string, save it as a Word document or in a Google Doc, so it's always online, whatever it is. You'll just always have your UI. It's just safe. It's in this nice, safe place. If you make a bunch of changes to it, export it again. Do the same thing. Like, just keep the safe one, because that way when we hit a patch day or when Dragonflight launches or whatever it is, and your whole UI is wiped, you aren't like, ugh, on day one, I have to redo all of this. You can just go import, done, fixed. Perfect. Like,
the other cool thing too is it'll remember if you play different specs. When you swap specs, you could set a HUD loadout to that spec. So, you know, if your healing UI setup is drastically different than your DPS one, which it is very well may be. You don't have to, you know, you're not gonna have to go in there and move everything around again. You can have different loadouts stored, and you can assign them to what spec is active. And you know, both of these features, the talent rework and the interface upgrade, they seem like things that are built to last and built for ongoing improvement and iteration, and, you know, just an intrinsic kind of part of this era of the game. So I think from what I've seen, edit mode came a long way really fast, just between when it originally came in an alpha to now. It's become really robust, has a lot of great features. For a lot of players, I think this is going to kind of alleviate the need for a full UI replacement mod. Like, not everybody is going to want to, but a lot of people will be able to, which is really cool. And I think it's just going to keep getting better as they, you know, just develop it more, get more feedback about how people are using it and stuff like that. I mean, it's very flexible, and it's cool to have like a simple thing baked into the game where, you know, maybe somebody's streaming a game or something and somebody pops in and like, hey, your UI looks really cool. How can I do that? And then you just get the string and then you can mess around with it, you know. Everybody can do it. They don't need like to be familiar with a particular add-on or anything. And I love it. I mean, it's a little weird for me, right? Because I don't really use a lot of add-ons. I definitely don't do any kind of UI replacement. I don't move stuff around. My typical UI is like very old school, very traditional and stripped down. And this is kind of going to be a learning curve for me, because I am going to have to get used to, I mean, like, yes, you can set it to be very similar to the previous, like, pre 10.0 UI, but even that's not exactly the same. And I feel like there's no reason not to take advantage of the features, since they're so easy to use and so easy to replicate. But yeah, for me, it's like, okay, I'm going to have to like relearn where stuff goes on the screen and kind of retrain my eyes to look in certain spots, because I'll be setting stuff up in edit mode and it's going to be different than the 18 years of the, you know, relatively stock UI I'm used to. So a lot of people are like, oh, this is great. I can cut this add-on. I can cut this or whatever. And I'm like, I got to learn how to use a UI that looks like it belongs in 2022 now.
Yes. Yeah. It's a little bizarre in that sense, but I'm with you. I'm looking forward to cutting down add-ons. I'm one of those people. But I do feel like some of even just the aesthetic change is something that's going to take some getting used to. What I am glad about is that it still feels fantasy-esque. It still feels like it belongs in that world. It's very easy, and a lot of people I know use ElvUI as the add-on that is their choice. I've always felt that is far too future tech, StarCrafty kind of looking stuff for what I'm looking for inside of my UI. They swear by it because it just does everything that they need it to do, and that's great. It's an easy add-on for them to do that with, but I like that aesthetic. I like the World of Warcraft aesthetic in my UI, so I'm glad they kept a lot of that, which makes me very happy. Okay. Achievements. there is a new achievement that's gone live. Jason was talking to me about this before we started up, because I love otters, and the 500 mount reward for getting 500 mounts is the Otterworldly Otter Otuk Carrier, which is this otter that you can ride around, and they're adorable, and I have to have one. So
yeah, they're awesome looking, and it's in the game now. So if you have that 500 mount threshold, if you're there now, or you can get there in pre-patch, you can get it before we even go to Dragon Isles. The new Tuskar faction rides these, and I think there are various color schemes of them you can get from Renown and whatnot from that faction, but they're super cool looking mounts. I can't wait to get one. I am nowhere near the 500 mount threshold. I just got the Frozen Core Infernal thing last week. So I don't think I'm going to be doing this in pre-patch, but if you are a mount collector, this is a really cool thing you can get.
Yeah,
I want to say right now, but you can't play the game right now. But when you can play it, then
in
you can
8
get
hours. Yeah,
right.
All right. New pet collection achievements have also been added. So there's now the 1,250 pets reward of the Crystalline Mini Monster, the 1,500 unique pets reward for the secretive Frog Duck, and the 1,750 unique pet reward of the Violet Violence, and finally the 2,000 unique pet reward for Mr. Muscoxeles, which these are all pretty wicked things. I think obviously the Frog Duck is the thing that most people are interested in right off the bat, because what's a frog duck? Well,
yeah, I mean, how long have we been waiting for such a thing? Right? A long time.
Ever since the platypus, we've been sitting around waiting.
Yeah. So really, it's cool that these things are in there already for collectors. If you want to work on these, or if you're close to one of these thresholds, or if you're already above them, then you just log in and get stuff. So that's a nice little bonus in this patch.
As far as your character goes, a few things have changed up. First and foremost, Resurrection Sickness was 10 minutes. It's now down to 1 minute. Obviously, you now suffer a substantial increase in your durability loss. It's basically 50% now as opposed to 25. But that 10 minute to 1 minute is pretty huge. It gets players back playing a lot quicker. There is still obviously now the gold penalty is really what it comes down to when it comes to the durability. So good change. Glad to see it. And that's just the first of many.
They're front loading the penalty for res sickness basically because of the durability cost and everything. But now you don't have to just go stand in town for 10 minutes and wait to play. So yeah, that's a good change.
And before Dragonflight goes live, and there's all these quest mobs that everyone has to tag, they've changed it up. So as long as you are not in war mode, if you're in war mode, it stays the same. But as long as you're not in war mode, up to 5 players of any faction, and by players they mean players, and that can be players in groups, which means 25 people total, could technically tag an enemy to earn quest rewards from it. So if you're traveling in a group of 5 people, and there's 4 other groups of 5 people who are doing so, and you all tag this mob, you would all get credit. 25 people at the same time would get credit for killing this quest mob. Pretty big, considering the biggest thing here is that the faction is now, obviously not a factor. That's the large thing. It was that way before. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I have mixed feelings about this, but I'm not going to get into that in this context. Yeah. I think overall, it just speeds up outdoor play. You don't really. We're moving towards a factionless future. Faction is becoming basically an aesthetic choice and not much else. And I think that's overall a big win for the game. I understand why back when they designed it the way that they did, but I think in the world that we live in now, factions should kind of just be an aesthetic choice. So. If you're doing stuff in Zereth Mortis, this is going to be good for if you're trying to gear up an evoker in that 2-week period, right before expansion comes out. There's gonna be a lot of evokers out in Zereth Mortis, so at least everybody can tag stuff together.
Exactly. They resolved an issue with the Voodoo Shuffle, which is the troll racial, which for some reason reduced the duration of roots less than everything else that it was reducing. So that's now resolved. It's back to 20%, just like snare reduction that is supposed to be in there as well. So that's all resolved for you trolls out there who are enjoying that. Dungeons and raids. So the 3 raids that are out that are now all faded, Castle Nathria, Sanctum of Domination, and Sepulchre, now use group loot. So that new group loot system is in. Not really new. They brought back the group loot system that existed previously. But it means that, you're no longer getting that personal loot kind of reward stuff. Be aware you're going to be killing a boss and people are going to be looking at it. A whole bunch of loot's going to pop up on the screen. There'll be need and greed roll kind of idea stuff happening, and people sorting that out. So that's going to be a thing again when you actually start killing bosses when servers come up. So keep that in mind.
I love this. I know this is somewhat controversial for some people, but for tight-knit groups, for groups that play together all the time, this is a win. It's just better. No more killing Sylvanas and getting 3 copies of the same ring that nobody wants.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it can technically happen. I don't know if there's going to be protection against like more than one of the same item or more than 2 of the same item dropping, but like it is so much less likely with a group loot arrangement to get like all rings or all cloaks off of a boss or something. Yeah, you might just totally brick the drops sometimes and get an item that literally nobody can use because it's not for anybody's class or spec, which that feels bad too. But yeah, the cloak or ring boss is a I don't think it comes close to offsetting how bad of a problem that has become over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll see. I mean, I would like some more options regarding assigning loot out, but the good thing is at the moment, I guess, like none of this loot really matters. If you've been playing this whole time, you're not going to be hungry for this loot at this point. And if you're trying to gear up, people are just going to be dumping loot on your head anyway. So
it's a good time to get used to the new system.
Yeah, it's a pretty safe way to roll it in.
Yeah. All right. There's also a new toy that you can buy if you're someone who is doing Night Fae things called the Seed of Renewed Souls. Basically, if you go and talk to Lady Mun in the Heart of the Forest, you will get a toy that allows you to change into your soul shape on a 5-minute cooldown. So this means that basically you can choose your soul shapes, go off and do Dragonflight stuff, and while you're running around Dragonflight, if you want to just fool around inside your soul shape form, you can. It's a thing. If I want to become my little soul-shaped Brutosaur or, Hippo or whatever it is I want, I can do that. I'm pretty excited about it. This is one of the carries over from this expansion that I genuinely love that they did, because I was sad that I was going to lose my soul shape after collecting all of them, and I have this huge collection of them, and I can only use them in Shadowlands.
Right.
That would suck.
Yeah, they put in so many of them over the course of the expansion, and it was a cool feature. It was a way to customize your character. I think bringing it in as a toy for just to change your appearance up, perfect way to carry it forward. It's a little callback to it. I mean, whether we loved or hated Shadowlands or somewhere in between, I mean, it is stuff that a lot of us played and put a lot of time into and built those collections. So having a way to kind of just echo that going forward. I mean, I've been using the Gulper Soul since I got it. So like, I don't know, about a year now, maybe longer than that. And I don't ever want to change it because it's just so goofy. It's huge, and the way it hops around is so funny. And it's a great target in Raid too, when like I need to get away from the group or something, or like I'm gonna an ad's gonna pop out of me and it's gonna look like me. I turn into this huge frog, so it's easy for everybody to see. Right? Like that's been actually a really fun part of Shadowlands. So I got to remember to buy this right away when I log in.
Yeah, that's one of the first things on my list too. Okay, they also obviously have the official note about turning off all of the set bonuses. They're legacying all of them, so that is something we know for sure is happening, is your set bonuses are going away. But there's no word on Legendary, so we'll see what happens with that. As far as pet battles go, there's upgrade stones that can now be applied to pets directly through the pet journal, as opposed to using one on a summoned pet. So that's much easier as opposed to summoning the pet and then using it on them, which I found really clunky, so I'm glad they changed that.
This is actually a huge change. This is so nice.
Just quality of life. Yeah.
The way that worked up until now has just been such a pain, Yeah. And I even tried to do it the other day. I forget where I got some pet upgrade stones from. I think I had my trainee with me while I was doing callings, right? And sometimes they just give you weird stuff like that.
Yeah.
I was like, man, you still got to like summon the pet and click on the pet model to upgrade it. Like, why?
Yeah.
Now you don't have to anymore.
Yeah. Rated Solo Shuffle is going live. So this is the solo shuffle that we've been experiencing as a brawl for the past chunk of time. Is now actually going to have a rated mode that you'll be able to participate in if that's something you're interested in doing. So yeah, that's something to check out if you're a PvPer and you're interested.
Yes, it's a great addition. And again, it's kind of coming in this low stakes sort of part of the expansion, You can still get stuff from doing rated PvP, but the big prizes are turned off and everybody is just kind of, whatever, farming conquest or whatever you're in there for. So it's sort of a low stress environment in which to turn it on. And I think it's going to be, reaction to the brawl seemed pretty strong. I have a friend who does solo shuffle like all the time, and they're not really a PvPer. They were not somebody who would do arenas like consistently, but they do solo shuffle a lot now, and I think having the rated option is going to be a really cool thing for people because they can earn like legit PvP rewards from participating in it, and the barrier to entry is a lot lower. So I mean, I like it. Other actual like PvP players may hate this because the bar maybe is too low or it's just too random the way it puts the matches together, but it's not like this supplants threes or anything like that, and some of the highest end rewards are still only going to be from those traditional rated arenas. So
right.
I think it's a nice addition.
Yeah. As far as PvP goes, since we're on the topic, all ranged spell casting and healing specializations now have a new PvP talent called Precognition, which is if an interrupt is used on you while you are not casting, gain 15% haste and become immune to crowd control for 4 seconds. So this is hey, if you happen to trip up the person who's trying to interrupt you and they happen to land it on you when you canceled your cast, it means that you then get a haste buff and then you're immune to their next CC for 4 seconds, which is pretty cool. That's a pretty neat one that they added in. They also reworked a whole bunch of other talents for a lot of the class and specs, which, if you're PvPing, go check them out, see what they sort of went through for your different class and spec. Might be something in there that you're super interested in, but that new talent overall for all ranged casters and healers that's a fun one. I like that they put that in there. It's gonna be cool to check out.
Yeah, it's a cool addition. It seems like it maybe adds some counterplay to certain types of situations like big CC chains and stuff, changes up maybe the moment-to-moment decision-making a little bit. It'll be interesting to see how serious PvPers feel about it, if it feels good or terrible to have it that way. But I like the idea of it. I like that they're trying something out like that to sort of, introduce that layer of counterplay there.
Yeah. They added, of course, the one bag. Basically, there used to be an add-on called One Bag, or there's a few of them actually, that made all of your bags into one large sort of size bag on your screen. They've now added that just as a combined bags into a single backpack option that you can go into options and controls and check to do that. So that's just in there. Some people prefer this. It's certainly a neat thing to do. I'll certainly check it out for a little while for sure. They updated the login screen. It now is Dragonflight login screen, so you'll have a nice, fun little thing to look at. That might actually be live. You might be able to open the game right now and just stare at that if you're looking for it.
If you launch the game right now while servers are down, it will play the Alex Straza full CGI cinematic, and you will see the new login screen. And actually, I think the UI even in like the login screens has been updated a little bit. It looks very clean. Yeah, it is like a gorgeous login screen, maybe one of the nicest they've ever done. I mean, obviously it's the most modern one, so it's going to be have the highest fidelity, right? But it looks, it has that kind of vibe of like, I think what the best WoW loading screens have done over the years is make you want to explore the world that's being depicted, right? Like the old like Dark Portal login screen or the Ice Crown one, the Shadowlands one was sort of like, okay, it was sort of like disconnected from what we were even doing, right? It was really about like the intro cinematic and that was about it. We'll see how we feel about this one over time, but I mean, it's striking. It's really a nice looking login screen when you first see it.
What's funny to me is a quality of life improvement that came in ages ago that I really enjoy. Also, kind of is unfortunate for login screens, which is the play button, where you just click play, it opens your game, puts you past the login screen to your character screen, you hit enter, you log in, you barely look at it anymore, right? They're so cool looking.
Zoom through it. Yeah.
It used to be that you would sit there, you'd be typing in your whole full email address, typing in your full password, putting in your authenticator code before you could actually get past that screen, so you'd have time to sit at it. And
maybe sitting in a queue.
Now the only time you're going to see it is in a queue. That's it. That's the only time you're going to see it is in a queue. So, yeah.
Or if Blizzard's being DDoSed or something, right? Log into the game. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a very cool thing that I know that a lot of artists put a lot of work into, and so it's unfortunate that we just look at it so briefly every now and then.
Zoom on by.
Yeah. Barbershop services are now free. I think this is
amazing.
Actually a fantastic change. I think one of the things that you'll see happen with this, that I'm hoping that they hope will happen, is people changing their haircuts really regularly. Or features about their character, things like that, to be like, yeah, you know what? I feel like today's a hair up day, today's a hair down day, today's like, why not, right? Like, you can do whatever you want with those things.
I think using it as a gold sync is maybe a little outdated. I also think maybe like the new profession system or something could be a better vector for a gold sync. And you do need to have gold syncs. You have to have a reason why players want to spend gold in order for them to want to have a reason to have gold. I I don't think the barbershop is really a great place to put that, though. Like, I think you want players to feel encouraged to customize their character and their play style, right? I think this sort of goes hand in hand with a lot of these philosophies that we're seeing coming in. The big shift we felt over the last year or so with this game, and I think this is kind of an outgrowth of that.
Yeah. Here, the next change here is actually one that has been massively overdue. It was something that I didn't even have on my list, but it's something that's bothered me every single expansion for the past, 12 years. Icon selection for macros. When you're making a macro, unless you do like show tooltip, which is a way to actually force it to look at the first spell inside the chain of spells that you're asking the macro to do, or the first spell that's part of that, and use that information immediately, that icon immediately, you have to scroll through this page of every single icon that is in the game. There's no way to really filter it well, and you just sort of scroll through it until you find the one that you're looking for and click on it. What they're allowing you to do now is to drag either a spell or an item or a mount or a pet or whatever on top of that icon area, and it assigns that icon. So you can basically be like, hey, you know what? I want this to be Fireball, but the first spell in the chain is Fire Blast, and so show tooltip, unless I do show tooltip space Fireball, it's going to always show Fire Blast just automatically as the information it's showing. Whereas in this case, you'd be like, no, I want this to be Fire Blast, Fireball, and something else, and I want it to have this really cool flaming person icon that I have from this potion or item or whatever it is, and you can put it there. You can have it be the Brutosaur if you want. It can literally be a Brutosaur icon that you can put in as part of one of your macros, as opposed to searching through the entire list of icons to find those things. It's just way easier to assign it. So I'm glad they did this. This made me really happy.
Yeah, this is an awesome change. I mean, one of the worst parts of making a macro is dropping in the tooltip, right?
Yeah.
If you're looking for something specific, yeah.
Yeah.
I tend to just like macro very simple things like I need this thing at my cursor. I need this thing at my character. So I just use the, pound show tooltip thing all the time. But if you want to really, mix up the way your macros look, it's a small and a simple change, but it's nice that it's there. It's all part of, I think, just overhauling this old game to feel, more modern and just give players more accessibility and flexibility to play how they want to.
Yeah. They added a new mouse over cursor for NPCs offering campaign quests. So that's the mouse over to interact. Keep that in mind, as well as just the cursor itself looks different. Are the two things that they added with that. Horde characters now have wyvern icons surrounding their action bars instead of griffins. So finally, no more alliance bias when it comes to action bars in UI. So good to see that happening. They implemented some additional gamepad support. So if those of you are actually using gamepads to play around, hopefully there's some new support in there that you're looking for. And then in the options menu, they did a bunch of things. You can now search for options using the newly added search bar. Always a nice thing to have when someone's like, oh, just click that one bag button. And you're like, well, where is it? Options, and then is it gameplay? Is it social? Where is it? Right? And it's like, well, you can search for bag. And now suddenly everything related to bag will pop up. So perfect, right? Great to have those search bars. Always important.
Yeah, well, the other thing too is to go along with that, like they moved a lot of stuff around in the options menu and then the interface menu and all this stuff. They are new menus. They have a lot of the same options and stuff, but they're not in the same places. So having a search function is incredible because it's not like the smartest search function in the world, but it's good enough. If you're looking for a specific thing, you don't have to go hunting through all these different tabs and scrolling up and down.
Yeah.
You can search for the thing you want, and then you can toggle the setting the way you want to. And you are probably going to have to do this week because a lot of stuff is changing and a lot of stuff has changed with how you change stuff, right?
Yeah.
Just getting into the menus to change the setting you want is not the same way it used to be. So, being able to search, again, this is the kind of thing that you would think if they were building the game from the ground up today would just be in there.
Yeah.
But it was a different world of computing in general back in 1999, 2000. So, it makes all this new stuff a lot more usable because you have these search options, even in like the talent UI, the talent trees, you have like search functions. So very nice additions.
Yeah. Speaking of changes, raid profiles page, for example, they actually moved some of that under interface, some of it went under edit mode. So if you're looking for like setting up your raid profiles, again, some of it could be under interface, some of it could be under edit mode. You can all kind of move around. You can now right-click a keybind to unbind it. So you actually have the option to unbind keybinds, which is nice, as opposed to just dragging other things on top of them. And you can never really have that blank square back, which is nice to do. All right. The interact key I already mentioned. That's the ability to actually have a button that you press. It's defaulted to F when you mouse over a target to actually interact with them. So just keep that in mind. If F is not working or bound to something else, you got to go to keybinds inside your keybinds menu and actually change it to interact with target. Press and hold casting. This is a new form of casting that comes in with the evokers, where basically you now have the option to continually cast a spell by holding down the key. This is for everybody, not just evokers, but this is where the concept came from, was from evokers. Where, hey, if I want to cast Frostbolt over and over and over again, I can just hold down 2, which is what my Frostbolt would be sitting on, and it would just cast Frostbolt, and then cast Frostbolt, and then cast Frostbolt, and I would never, I just hold the button down. No
Who
more
would
like
ever want to
spam
do such a
clicking it.
thing? Who would ever want to cast that many Frostbolts in a row? I can't imagine.
Yes, well...
Sorry, mages.
Yeah, it's one of those cases where, to me, it's an amazing quality of life for players, because there's so often in a DPS rotation where you want to do something 3 times or whatever, and you just, like, you can hear it inside Discords of people just pounding their keys trying to cast their spells as fast as possible. And it's like, no, if you can just hold down 2 and then hold down 3 while 2's casting, and then hold down 1 while 3's casting, and then hold down 4 while 1's casting, and keep doing that, you can actually have a rotation where you're just moving your fingers between keys casually, as opposed to spam clicking one, spam clicking the next, spam clicking the next. It's no longer necessary. Some people enjoy that playstyle, but it's no longer necessary, which I like.
Yeah, I mean, I find for myself, like, just, hitting buttons on GCD, I established this kind of tempo, to play with, and I feel like it helps me.
Yeah.
But this is another one of those things. It's like, where has this been all these years?
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, were there forces that were actively like, no, don't put stuff like this in World of Warcraft? Or, was it just like, we want to, but it requires some back end stuff that we just don't have the budget for? Or like, I don't know why it has taken this long to get stuff like, if you hold down a key, you just keep casting the spell that it's bound to. Like, why did that take 18 years?
Yeah, it's like I said, that's why I mentioned it comes in with the evokers, because evokers particularly have spell casts with their breaths that the longer you hold down a key, the spell then changes what it's doing, and when you release it, it casts it at whatever step of the way it is. So I do wonder, to a certain degree, whether it was we needed the budget to get the tech to be able to do this, and evokers were the solution to getting the budget for the tech to do this, right? Like, they couldn't get the dev time to make this happen until they had evokers. And the moment they had evokers, they're like, well, that evoker thing that works really well, we could actually just apply that to all spells and just make everyone able to do this. Yeah.
I mean, any changes in the game as old and as broad as WoW, like, there's always that kind of cascading effect. So yeah, maybe that they needed the impetus to be able to code that in or something, and evokers were, a good enough reason. It's a cool option. I think for like mages and stuff, I think it's great, or for certain specs that maybe just always want to be hitting the same ability until something procs. It's like, you can save a lot of wear and tear on your wrist, your fingers, your mouse, keyboard, whatever. Like, that's a great option.
Yeah. Now there's a couple caveats with this, right? So first of all, this is only keyboard hotkeys that are supported, right? So holding down your mouse click, if you bound Frostbolt to left click, you can't just hold down your mouse click and have it cast Frostbolt constantly. That's something that is important. It'll cast it the one time if you choose to bind something like that. It also doesn't work with macros and items. So this is the tricky part for me, right? Like, I would want to continue to have a lot of my spells macroed, because a lot of the times it's macros with like stop casting, so that if I'm already casting a spell, I can interrupt casting that spell to cast the more important spell that I want to cast immediately. It means that this wouldn't work for that. Now, often with those spells that I'm doing that with, though, I don't want to just cast those over and over and over again. They're typically a unique, hey, I need to pop this big cooldown right now. I'm not going to be able to cast Convoke over and over and over again. It makes sense to have a stop casting macro with Convoke, so I can just pop it when I want to pop it. But that is something to keep in mind.
Yeah, that could be a downside for people that use stuff that's like heavily macroed,
Yeah.
And I have some specs that I have played where I macroed a lot of different abilities because I wanted that much flexibility. And so, yeah, I guess you got to kind of prioritize, how you want your playstyle to function in that case.
Yeah. The other big thing is items. So you can't be like, hey, you know what? I'm going to just sit here and drink potions all day by pressing and holding down my potion button, and it just goes glug 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 over and over again. That doesn't work. You can't. They're not letting you do that. So that's a thing as well. And I think this is smart because I think there'll be a lot of people who go to drink a flask if they have it on a keybind of some kind, and then drink like 12 flasks by accident because they just held the button down too long. Kind of resolves
the
that
cat
issue.
walks across the keyboard and uses all of their expensive consumables.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh no,
Instantly. Yeah.
Cat, you just cost me 4,000 gold.
Yes, exactly. And so if you're looking for this option, it's options, combat, and then there's the press and hold casting that you can choose to use. Action targeting, this is really weird. I still would like to hear people's feedback on what they think of this. This is whatever direction your character's facing, it will automatically target the closest enemy in that direction. So as you turn your character through a group, you will actually have your character start targeting things from left to right if you're turning from left to right, and it will keep changing targets as you turn your character. So just keep that in mind. That's what action targeting is. I almost feel like this might be like a console/controller support thing, like a gamepad support option for players who aren't using some sort of tabbing thing for their controller. I think this might be a little bit easier for that kind of playstyle. So that might be where this comes from, but I'm just curious if people are going to try it out or not. It's certainly not something I'm interested in at all.
I might check it out. It might be okay for tanking because a lot of times you don't really care what specifically you're targeting in some cases. Like if you have 3 melee targets or something, right? Like the dudes are just going to auto attack you, nothing to interrupt or whatever. Maybe you don't even care like which one you're pulling. You just want to get in there and pull it, you know? It might be cool. And I think once you tab, it like shuts off. I don't know. That's kind of the way they sort of describe it in the notes of breaking down the feature. It's like once you press tab to lock onto a target, now you are in tab target combat. So it might be like, okay, I can just quickly, I don't have to like wait and pull a target to, I don't know, charge into a pack or something. I already have the target pulled and I can hit it. Like that could be cool. It's an interesting idea. It might be one of those things that's too hard for me to wrap my WoW veteran brain around implementing in any useful way. Or it might just be that, like it's cool for if you can't really use a mouse very well to pull a target, or like you like tab targeting isn't an option for you for whatever reason. But it's never going to be smart enough to, tab target has its own issues for sure, but it might just be a situation where it's like, okay, if I can tab or I can click my target, then I'm just going to do this because action targeting is not consistent enough maybe, but we'll see. I might check it out this week.
Yeah. And then of course, one last little feature to mention here, the display name size adjustment. So basically right now, as someone moves farther away from you, their name gets smaller and smaller because it represents that they move farther away from you. If you choose to do this, you can actually set it so that there's a minimum text size to keep all the world's names, like all the names that exist on NPCs and characters inside of the world. You can set a text size for it. And if you have this turned on, the names will actually fade out as people travel farther away from you, which I think might actually be kind of neat to see. So I'm probably going to play around with this a little bit. It's under options, accessibility, and minimal character name size. Because I think that might be kind of cool to check out, as opposed to having them get smaller and smaller, or have them actually fade away so they're not on my screen. I would love if they applied something like this to nameplate bars on mobs, so that when I'm fighting one group of mobs, the mobs that are 30 or outside of my attackable range don't have nameplates or have much more faded nameplates. They're very, very invisible. I think would be a very nice feature for them to add in right off the bat.
Yeah, just clean that stuff up a little bit, right? Like that would be a good way to do that. Just, okay, the visual information I'm receiving from the screen is actually relevant because the stuff is close enough to me for it to matter,
Yeah, as opposed to it being just as solid and bright but smaller, being faded, and hey, this means that you can't actually hit them from where you are. That to me would be a really interesting visual detail to add in. Yeah. Okay. Things to do when you're mostly dead. This is the update that they threw in for basically just representing that Mythic Plus rewards are going to remain obtainable obtainable after Season 4 ends. So for the foreseeable couple of weeks, you will still have access to the Mythic Plus rewards if you're looking to get your teleports and things like that done. Keep that in mind. You can still do that. The Eternity's End class sets are becoming legacy. This is, of course, your talent, your tier sets are all becoming sort of voided They're not going to be usable. We've mentioned that earlier in the show, but just, there was a blue post about it, so I want to mention it again. And then, of course, the roadmap for when things go live. And this is something that released just after we recorded last week's show. So phase 2, just so you're aware, obviously we're in phase 1 right now, so we're talking about phase 2 kicks off on November 15th. That's going to have the Evoker. That's going to have the Forbidden Reach, which is where the Evokers start. That's going to have Uldaman Legacy of Tyr, the dungeon that everyone can go and check out. And it's going to have the Primal Storms in-game event kickoff. So the 15th is when all the big, exciting, fancy new stuff sort of kicks in, outside of the UI changes and whatnot we've just recapped. So if you're looking for brand new content, if you will, that is on the 15th of November is when we're going to see that. Expansion launches November 28th. And then, of course, raids open on December 13th. And by raids, we mean all of them, including Mythic. So another shift that they're doing this time around. So keep that in mind, too.
And they're going to be doing Twitch drops around phase 2 of pre-patch, launch day, and the raid opening. So that's interesting. I can't ever remember seeing Twitch drops for a while before. I wonder what they're going to be giving away. That's kind of cool. We don't have any details on it yet. We saw the roadmap last week, like you mentioned, and I figured, okay, well, I'm sure someone will let us know what the Twitch drops are going to be or like how to participate.
Yeah.
And nothing. I mean, obviously they have 3 weeks until the first round of them starts, but I thought we would get some info last week, maybe.
So what's going to happen right now in the postseason, just so everyone's aware, you can still earn the Keystone Master mount. So the following rewards are going to continue until Dragonflight launches. Just keep that in mind. Still earn the Keystone Master Season 4 achievement and mount. You can still earn the teleports. You can still get M+ rating as you compete higher, but obviously the 0.1% thing is gone. That ended. Valor points can still be earned and used to upgrade your gear. The Great Vault progress can be accrued every week. In PvP, you can still continue to do rated stuff even though the season's over. PvP rating can still be earned and increased, your win rate in matches. You can still track all that. You can get your Vicious Mount progress for all those Vicious Mounts or Vicious Saddles. All that kind of stuff is still going on. You still get Great Vault stuff for it. In raids, basically all raids become fated. The fates of the Shadowlands raids, along with Jigglesworth Senior and the Hero of Fate and raid teleports, they're all still accessible until Dragonflight launches. The puzzling cartel dinars are going to continue to be available for people to get, and the confounding and antique cipher and the ancient cipher are still obtainable for upgrading gear if that's something you want to do, and of course Great Vault stuff for raid still happening. So it's really just the very fine top tier stuff that went away. Everything below that is still available, unless you were in that 0.1% of Mythic Plus or the 2400 plus PvP or doing something crazy with Mythic raids. You're not missing out on anything when pre-patch kicks off. So keep that in mind.
Yeah, it's nice they didn't do any currency resets or anything for this. Like if you had stuff that you were sitting on, you can still use it to gear up a little bit here in this 5-week period. So, and yeah, I think it was the right call to leave Keystone Master, leave the mount on, leave the teleports on, all that stuff. We need people are going to be coming back to the game. I feel like we're going to have an influx of people coming back for this patch and for this upcoming expansion. And you want to at least have something for them to do. If you shut all that off, it's like, okay, well, yeah, the Mythic Plus system is dead. You could do it for gear, but there's really nothing else cool you can get from it. Okay, well, that takes a huge chunk of stuff for people to do out of the loop right now. And we'll see. We'll see how it feels tonight or tomorrow, whenever we can get in there. I do have some concerns about how Fated raids are going to feel to bring in people who are not real familiar with Shadowlands raids, not familiar with Fated raids, and all these other things are in flux around the game. To people want to log in and do stuff and play with their friends or play with their guild group, and it's I don't know if I want to bring you to Fated Heroic Sepulchre if you've never done it before.
Right.
That doesn't sound like a good time for me and the 15 of us that have been doing it the whole time.
Yeah.
Which sucks, but it just is what it is with this particular set of content. So hoping the tuning is going to kind of close that gap where it's okay, you want to come play, come, let's check it out, and we'll figure it out and we'll kill bosses.
A large
just
part
put Protoform Barrier on every boss.
That's what I'm saying. A large part of this is going to be what affixes are up each week, because that was the number one factor that went into people on our raid team going, hey, I still need Fate Scribe, or I still need Skolex, or I still need, how can I get these bosses to try and get my teleport? A lot of it's we'll see what the week is as far as what the affixes are, and we'll decide based off that, because we don't want to deal with crappy affixes, which, again, big message to Blizzard, FYI, people are choosing not to kill bosses because of the affix that the week is. Like, FYI, this is bad. You should not be putting out content that is making people go, it's just a pain in the butt to deal with. I just don't want to do that. Like, that's not something you should be doing.
Just everybody should just have barrier. All 31 bosses just have barrier. Yeah. That would be great.
Yeah, people would be fine with that. All right, so we got a big blue post from Kaivax, which recaps what Rated Solo Shuffle is. I mean, Solo Shuffle has been around for a while now. We've talked about it numerous times on the show. So I'm going to recap some of this, which is just Solo Shuffle is 6 people queue up, 2 healers, 2 DPS. They round robin their way through every single combination of what those people can be. And the wins are very individual. So if your team wins, you get a win. If your team loses, you get a loss. And because you rotate through everyone gets a chance to play with everyone in every single configuration of that. And so that's how you find out who got the most wins overall, and you earn rating based off of that. So Rated Solo Shuffle is earning rating based off of that. It was the Brawl number 12 that they released, and it's something that they're adding cross-faction to with Rated Solo Shuffle. So Horde and Alliance can play matches together, which will mean that you can actually have a much quicker queue, because you won't be dealing with waiting for people of your faction to do something, and the faction that's overpopulated won't be waiting on the underpopulated faction to actually get a team together, which is a nice thing. Will rating be based off class specializations? Yes. Observing data from Solo Shuffle Brawl, rated arena matches, and reading community feedback, we felt that it was important to have a player's rating be tied to a specialization rather than the class in this game mode. This means that if you are a healer, your rating is healing rating, and if you switch to DPS, you do not have DPS rating until you play DPS matches. Keep that in mind. That is how that works. So just be sure you're picking your specialization before you go in, because you're going to get the wrong role, and that you're keeping in mind what you're trying to focus on rating wise. Also coming in season 1 of this Rated Solo Shuffle, players will be able to see where they rank against others in their specialization in the Solo Shuffle on the official World of Warcraft websites. They're putting up a leaderboard for Solo Shuffle, and you can find out where you are on that leaderboard. Now, there's things like this that have existed with Raider.io and a variety of other websites already, but this is sort of the official Blizz one, which is kind of neat that they're dipping their hands into that and putting up their own official board. I know I've always liked having the Halls of Fame, so it's nice to see they're doing something else similar to that. As far as rewards go for Raid Solo Shuffle, it's the same thing when it comes to all the other PvP stuff of earning the different currencies and whatnot. Now, the big thing to remember, though, is that players will earn all seasonal titles and achievements that they would normally in rated arenas, with the exception of Gladiator, because it's specifically associated with doing arenas. But if you're looking for particular mounts, if you're looking for things like that, you can still earn all of those through Solo Shuffle. And they also recognize that some class specializations may perform better than others in Solo Shuffle, as well as having a different total representation within the game mode. Because of this, they're introducing a new, unique end-of-season title for the 0.1% of each specialization in Solo Shuffle. So we're going to find out what that is, but we know that the Season 1 one will be Crimson Soloist, is the title that you're going to get. Then they've received community feedback about the title, and they're evaluating it to see if people like it or don't like it, but right now that's what it is Crimson Soloist. So I like this. I kind of wish that this reward was for the not just specialization, but was the top 0.1% of each class inside that specialization. So if you were someone who was the 0.1% of Subtlety Rogue, or the 0.1% of Assassination Rogue, or the 0.1% of whatever you were doing, that to me would also be really interesting to sort of broaden this. I know it's supposed to be a prestigious title, but I still think if you make it to 0.1% in your role, you deserve a title like this. Not just, sorry, in your role as a particular class, you deserve a title in this. So that would encourage players to be like, hey, you know what? Boomkins are really underrepresented right now inside Solo Shuffle PvP. Maybe that's what I'll do and try and get into the 0.1% of Boomies and get this title, because that's a really cool title. That to me would be neat. It would encourage players to actually broaden that out a bit. So yeah, I think that could be kind of cool. All right, do you want to say something there?
Well, I think they're doing a lot of smart stuff with the way they're bringing this in as a rated mode. including stuff like spec-specific rating, having a high-end title, come in the first season that's available, still restricting like the traditional Gladiator title to, the traditional arena mode. Also, the MMR calculation they kind of talk about, how it's based on which matches you win more so than how many matches you win total. It can be, at least it's weighted that way. So yeah, I feel like, response to Solo Shuffle has been pretty strong, and I think it was smart for them to bring it in as a brawl before they made it an actual, rated gameplay mode. And I'm sure that as it gets up and running, and as there are some more stakes involved, that they're going to find these other cases where they need to think about the design and maybe make some other different exceptions. But I think they've set the mode up to succeed as a rated mode. I'm curious to see how it's going to work. I mean, we've never had, solo rated PvP before.
Yeah. No, I'm pumped for it. I think could be a really, really fun game mode. They also mentioned they're going to schedule a Play with the Blues event in the next few weeks, focused on Solo Shuffle. So that could be pretty cool. We'll see what they choose to do with that. But Mage Tower extended maintenance. Basically, they have some extra work to do on the Mage Tower challenge to provide the best experience for those who are pursuing rewards with the pre-expansion stuff going on. So they're going to disable Mage Tower for a little bit, do the maintenance they need to do on it, and then they'll re-enable it soon after the launch of Dragonflight. So we know that basically Mage Tower is going to be down for just over a month, at least, and then when it comes back, it'll be all balanced out for all the new talents and everything else that people are kicking off. So if you're working on your Mage Tower stuff, I kind of wish we got this announcement a little bit sooner, but
I don't know when this came in. It came in it came in after last Tuesday anyway, right?
So less than a week for people who are working on it.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's not going away forever, but you're not going to be in there for a bit here, which makes sense. I mean,
well, it's a massive rework of the classes. Yeah,
and that was kind of always, to me, the argument against bringing the Mage Tower back. I mean, I think the way they did it is okay, especially since there's unique rewards from this version of the Mage Tower, but it was like, the Mage Tower specifically existed to challenge your mastery of the spec within the context of Legion, right? And it was built to really test those particular class and spec designs that existed at the time. And the game moves on, and you could scale the overall difficulty of the content up and down, but it doesn't mean that the classes are going to play the exact same way. So I think that the way they ended up going with making Mage Tower an ongoing feature is good. It's fine. But that does mean this is the first time we've seen an expansion role since it came in as this sort of evergreen feature. It does mean that, we should probably expect some tweaking and some downtime for it around these big changes to the game.
Yeah. And then last but not least, with Dragonflight Legacies, they're back, Jason. They're redoing these animated shorts. They're doing a whole bunch of them now. So kicking off today, there's going to be basically Nor's Dormu, the aspect of the bronze Dragonflight, delving into the past to see what key, things need saving for their uncertain future. This also sets up what we thought might be happening with a lot of bronze Dragonflight endgame stuff for Dragonflight potentially being a thing. So we'll have to see where this all leads, but I'm excited to have these back. These are always fantastic and phenomenal. Some of my favorite WoW story stuff has been told inside these animated shorts, so excited to see them happen. I'll be watching the one today.
Yeah, these are always really cool. It's definitely like, that it's expansion time when these start rolling out, right? Mm-hmm. And a lot of times, they tell a lot more of the expansion story and like kind of preview what's going to be happening in the overarching story through these than we realize at the time when we're watching them. I should go back and watch the Shadowlands ones now that we've seen the whole thing. I didn't think to do that.
Ursoc.
So, maybe fast forward through that part. But yeah, I mean, these are cool, and the first one actually has been released as we've been recording here, so we haven't seen this first one yet because it just came out. Although I did notice they did not publish the credits on the website or within the video itself or in the YouTube comments for the post, the YouTube description. People made this, they did the art and they directed it and they edited it. And they wrote the script and they voice acted it. And I would like to know who those people are. They did a really good job with that for the Shadowlands ones. They were in the website posts, they broke down, who did the music for this, all that stuff.
Yeah.
So hopefully they can clean that up and get that in there because those people deserve credit for their work. These are such a cool way to set the the table for an expansion. And I mean, the aspects and the dragon flights, they're such iconic characters in this fiction. It's cool to see them highlighted in this way. So I'm really looking forward to these. I can't wait to check this one out that just came out. And
there's a reason why in the movie motion picture industry, credits had to play before the movie played for a long time. It was really important that everyone's, got their recognition before the movie kicked off, because it meant everyone watched it, and then people kept wanting to throw it at the end, and then those lists got longer and longer, and it made more and more sense to put them at the end, and then so we now have the credits roll that go for like 20 minutes at the end of a movie.
Right.
But that's just because people now spend hundreds of millions of dollars on a movie that involves, hundreds of thousands of people working on it. So, but it is important to have. Like, even if you just threw credits at the end of this, I would have appreciated that for sure.
Yeah, hopefully they'll go back and update it, because we should have them. But I mean, it's definitely a cool part of the kind of pre-expansion ritual, and it I don't know, it's weird. Like, it really doesn't feel like we're 5 weeks out from expansion.
It doesn't at
all. To me, part of that, I guess, is just life itself and the paradox of time experienced by the human brain. And the older you get, the faster it all goes, right? Yes. Like, that's definitely part of it in my case, for sure. Also, like, I mean, life is just very busy in general, but also this last year of World of Warcraft has been a real whirlwind. Like, whether you like Shadowlands or not, like, if you've been invested in it, there's been a lot of stuff to do, a lot of changes, a lot of updates to it, in addition to the classic realm and everything like that as well, plus doing the testing phases. And then I think the Season 4 roll was genius. I mean, did it hit every single note exactly right? Like, not really, but it's been engaging to play and really fun, and made that long tail on an expansion feel way shorter than usual. So I mean, I'm obviously ready for expansion. It's just this one feels like it's coming up really fast, which I have never felt that way about a WoW expansion. Every WoW expansion has been like, can this thing please get here already? And this one, it's like, I mean, I'm good. Like, everything I kind of want to do with Shadowlands, I feel like I've done, but it's a little bit almost like shocking to me that we're only 5 weeks out from Dragonflight.
Yeah. Well, with that, we're going to play a quick signer for our patrons, and we'll be right back. Hi, everyone. I'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons. They contribute a ton to our show and help us to improve on the content we create. Today, I'm giving a special shout out to Arajian, Celian, Infark, Kapawi, Mibble the Mighty, Nick, and Shorel. Thank you. This sounder is for you. You can find our Patreon over at patreon.com/thestartingzone. A big shout out and thank you to our newest patrons, Max S, Tregas, Billy D, and Othidian. My goodness, we haven't had this many patrons new in a week in a long time. Thank you so much. All of your support means a lot to us. And we'll be kicking off the November event at some point soon, as far as the Q&A episode. So if you guys are coming up with questions as you sort of dive into this new phase of World of Warcraft, feel free to write them down. You can either submit them inside our Discord or through Patreon. You can always ask them whenever you want inside those places. And if you want them for the show, obviously we can, save them and collect them all up and put them all into the same episode. And that'll be really easy for us to do in an episode with. So we always run into the problem of people had really great ideas and they didn't write them down, and 2 weeks passed and they forgot what it was, and then they can't remember it. And then we're doing our call-in show and then they don't have anything. And yeah, it's great if you just take the moment, jot it down, send it to us. We'll make a note of it. We'll take care of it for you. Yeah,
we'll file them away.
Yeah.
And also, like, we have some stuff that's been hanging out in the mailbag for a long time that we probably need to get through before expansion, because the questions probably already don't make as much sense as they did when they were asked, and they're going to make even less sense the longer we wait. But it's been such a roller coaster this year. There's been so much stuff to talk about, and our format is tight, and even with the tight format, we've been routinely doing 2-hour episodes and 90-minute plus episodes just all the time.
Yeah.
Because there's just too much WoW to talk about. We don't even hit everything that we could hit in that time. You know what I mean? So, but yeah, just amazing support for the show. Thank you so much. 4 new patrons in a week is
huge.
That is, it's not typically, how our aging Patreon campaign works, right? We've been doing it for a really long time now. So welcome aboard. Thank you for supporting the show, and can't wait to hear from people. Obviously we'll get whatever the November event is going to be on the schedule sooner than later, because we're obviously not going to do like the week that Dragonflight is out.
Yeah.
I think everybody would rather be playing Dragonflight than talking about it. And we also, Dragonflight comes out right after American Thanksgiving. So, we might have to, we might be again a bit earlier in the month than we've done previously. So
yeah, or we might do save them up and do a December big huge episode thing. There's
do like
another
a
option.
post Dragonflight, like, hey, now that everybody's had a chance to really dig in there, and now that we're in the day to day, like, how are we feeling? Yeah, that might also be an option.
Yeah. But yeah, so we'd be looking forward to doing something with you guys on that. So feel free to jot down your questions if you have them. If you've enjoyed this episode of The Starting Zone, consider heading on over to your iTunes, your Apple Podcasts, leave those 5-star reviews. They really help out our show. We got none to read right now, which means if you submit yours, we can get it on the show and have it all read out. They do help us out a bunch, so we appreciate those iTunes 5 stars. That wraps up episode 548 of The Starting Zone. If you want to check out show notes for this episode or leave us a comment on the show, head on over to the startingzone.com, the official website for the Starting Zone podcast. If you want to contact the show and leave us your feedback or ask a question, you can email us at thestartingzone@gmail.com or reach out to us on Twitter. Or join our Discord, as I mentioned earlier, thestartingzone.com/Discord. Feel free to hop in there. That's where you can post those questions if you're a patron. You can sync up your Patreon account with your Discord account. You get all the fancy colored names and access to channels and whatnot. And if you want to get your hands on some TSE gear, you can find that over at TeePublic. That's teepublic.com/stores/thestartingzone. Check out all the sweet designs on shirts and stickers and everything else over there. And Jason, where can folks find you on the internet?
Best place to find me is over on Twitter. You can find me over there at Shieldwald. You can also find me streaming WoW over on twitch.tv/Shieldwald and also youtube.com/Shieldwald. I've been experimenting with restreaming to both sites, so it seems to be working okay, as long as I have the upstream to keep that going. So
yeah.
Going to try to stream tonight if the game is playable. We'll have at least Tuesdays and Wednesdays going forward. I'm not sure. I don't know if Sundays are going to be on the menu for this postseason or not. It depends on what people want to do and what everybody's goals are. So I'm not sure what to expect in terms of that schedule, but it'll obviously be ramping up as, pre-patch phase 2 starts up and as the expansion comes out, but we might be on a 2-night schedule for the next little while here.
Yeah. If you're trying to find me, you can find me on Twitter at Spencer_Downey or over on twitch.tv/SpencerHD. And with that, for Jason and myself, we want to say thanks for listening and jobs done.